I'm going to tell you something that you already know, but you probably haven't really heard it put this way before. It's that everybody does have their baggage in their past, and everybody has everything that they've been through and all of the things that they've experienced and all of these different kinds of burdens that we've accumulated through our past. But eventually, there's going to be points where sometimes people with certain baggage are going to drag you down and are going to make your destiny far less. Well, nothing can really stop what you're destined for, I would say, but at the same time, it's going to put a lot more obstacles in your path along the journey to your destiny if you invite certain people into your life. Now, there's nothing wrong with encouraging people or wanting to build people up, but sometimes people don't deserve to be brought up if they are acting in a way that is contrary to the benefits and the goodness, truth, and beauty of mankind, I would say. You don't need those kinds of people in your life. And I want to share a Bible verse from Luke 9:22 and 23 and 24. It says, "The Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected of the elders and the chief priests, and scribes, and be slain, and be raised on the third day." And he said to them all, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and let him take his cross up daily, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it." So what does exactly it mean to carry your cross each day? And how can we apply this carrying of the cross into our practical day-to-day lives? Well, look around you and look at who needs you. Who needs you more than you need them? Now, if you're a man watching this, I highly recommend you be the kind of person that is independent and doesn't really need anybody. You know, you're self-sufficient. You are a person that you can rely on yourself and you can be relied upon to complete certain tasks. That is the way, the preferred way of living life as a man. It's far better as a man to be needed than it is to need. And something that I've noticed with women specifically is that they get upset and simultaneously turned on when you don't need them. And they get really anxious at you wanting them and not needing them sometimes. And I'm not talking about the women that are actually traditional or have some kind of sense of security in their self. The women that aren't super excited by the attention of other men are the kinds of women that don't need validation so much. They're not in need of it because they can get it from inside, and they probably had a steadier father figure throughout their life where they like to have that attention wasn't necessarily from other men specifically, wasn't necessarily a desire. Because if you think about it, we all try to attain that which we lacked when we were younger. And the reason for this, I think, is strictly psychological, but it is also biological, and it plays a part in our psychology. So imagine you are someone that did not receive a lot of attention or care properly from the time you were a child. And I might even be describing someone right here, right now. But imagine you were someone like this and you were abandoned, you were neglected, your physical needs were met, sure, but your emotional and spiritual needs were almost completely absent from the entirety of your life situation. Now, you may have had other people in your life that you could go to or turn to in some way, shape, or form, and that was all nice and dandy, but your mother and father, or your mother or your father, whoever it was, I know there have been people that I've talked to in consultations that they don't have their family members. They're not alive anymore, one or the other. And so I've seen this also in my personal life as well, where I've seen old friends of mine that lose their mother or their father, and the daughter of the mom that died like now has to become a woman without that kind of role model of a woman. And likewise, you can have a boy that now has to become a man even though he's very young. Now, I myself was someone that I had to be very self-reliant from a young age. And I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, and I'm very much in tune with how and what kind of behaviors I associate myself with and why I do those things and why I did those things in order to get certain kinds of attention or in certain kinds of desires met. And a lot of the times it wasn't ever really physical closeness that I desired. Even though I didn't get that a lot personally growing up, it was more so emotional and spiritual myself. But imagine you're this person that has lost a family member young, and you happen to be the same gender as the person that died, as the mother or fatherly figure that died. You have to now become that person to some degree. And so every single move that you make in your relationships from then on out is going to be affected by this situation and this, I would say, catastrophe to some degree, because well, maybe not a catastrophe. Maybe that's too much of a word. It's maybe a tragedy, let's say. But how do you overcome the tragedy? Well, how do you support yourself through this tragedy? Well, you have to carry the cross. You have to bear the burden of existence. And these people out here that lied to you, that maybe treated you in a way that I'm imagining this person right now, where now that they have this family member gone from them, they feel abandoned. They maybe have other people lying to them, trying to tell them that things aren't the way that they seem, or everything is really not that bad, or whatever. And in the inside, you're feeling this deep sense of longing, deep sense of grief being brought before you. Well, what the test would be in this situation is how we conduct ourselves properly from this, and how do we move forward, and how do we create relationships that are meaningful and healthy going forward. Well, you have to get out of certain environments, number one. And if you can't get out of the environment, then you're going to have to at least limit yourself to your environment. And I don't even like to say that, actually, now that I think about it. It's not necessarily that you're limiting yourself to your environment. It's that you have to curate your environment in a way that makes known that your boundaries are your boundaries and that you have your full sense of self intact. A lot of the times, people don't want to grieve certain things. This is what it means to bear your cross as well. Sometimes you're going to have to grieve. Sometimes you're going to have to look at the things that have haunted you in your past. You can look at it, and it's like you have this certain kind of prejudice against it because you don't like looking at the things that make you feel down in the dumps or down in the low valleys of sorrow. Well, how do you climb out of the valleys of sorrow? You're what you're doing is you're giving yourself the illusion that you're in an oasis. You're in an oasis of healing. But what the real healing is when you go down into the death valley of sorrow, and you actually go through and you carry your cross through hell. That's really what this is all about. And a lot of people are not going to be able to make that journey with you. And so now, not imagining this person and what it's going to be like to be this person. Now imagine yourself and experiencing and re-experiencing all the things that you've ever experienced, and thinking about all the times where people counted you out, or all the times where people just seemed like they wanted to sway you in a certain way, but only for their benefit. It was only for what they could get out of it. There was no kind of building going on. There was no kind of reconciliation, no kind of brotherhood or sisterhood or anything of the sorts. There was no like holy sense and pure sense in the relationship. You can get a feel for the kind of vibe that someone has when you're talking to them. And for example, with myself, because I was so emotionally and spiritually absent for most of my beginnings of life, I'm now to the point to where my greatest weakness when I was younger is now my greatest strength. And so when I'm interacting with a person, specifically a woman, let's say, if I'm interacting with a woman and after the interaction, I kind of let myself settle with the emotions in the kind of conversation that we had. I let myself settle into the energy that we had together. And I can tell what kind of woman she is based off of how she tried to make an impression on my energy. If I have certain forms of I would say, how would you say it? Forms of being with myself that include certain kinds of emotions or stimulations, I know what this person is trying to get from me. I know what this person wants from me. And a lot of the times, I'm not going to be able to give those things to certain people, especially women. It's just not going to happen. Even if they're a 10. It's just not going to be able to happen. I can look at you and I can think that, yeah, that's a dime. She is a beautiful woman. But then I look into her eyes and I see the darkness, and I see that she is living a life of promiscuity, that she is living a life that she doesn't want to help herself. You got to let them go, man. You got to let that person go. And this is, I guess, a good place to talk about how to let go of urges as well, and temptations. If you take on the energy of those kinds of people, you're going to carry the energy of those burdens as well with you. Spiritually speaking, you're going to take on that energy. So be very careful of who you're sharing energy with. And one of the ways that I found that you contain your energy, you hold your energy, one of the ways that you do that is, number one, by making sure that you're being assertive and that you're setting the tone for the situation. Otherwise, and you have to let your energy be like a force field. I don't know exactly how it's to describe it. It's a good way to think about it in a spiritual sense, because if you imagine that, and you can imagine this right now, you can imagine just this orb of light around you that penetrates, and that, think about, for example, I don't know if anybody's seen the anime Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's the only anime I've ever watched all the way through. And I don't like anime. I'm not particularly a fan. Not going to hate on anybody that likes anime, but it's just not for me. And there was a part in the very ending episode, I think, where the main character's pure light is able to break the darkness of the bad guy. And that's how basically he wins. He wins against the bad guy, is just by making sure that the pureness of light is going to expose the darkness. And that's exactly what it's going to be like with people that are following God or that are in the Spirit. The blood of Jesus, if it is being poured upon you, mind, body, and soul, you're going to be, and if you pray for that to happen, you're going to get to the point to where you act as a purifying light that no darkness can penetrate. There's also a verse in the Bible that's a famous verse. It's, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." That's a good way to think about it, because you don't need certain kinds of exterior things. You need the Spirit. You need your internal spirit and consciousness to be fully present in the situation. And you can tell if somebody isn't present with you. You can tell if they're not present. It's very easy to tell. And when they're not present with you, then that's an indicator of how they run their lives. They're not present with you. They're probably not going to be present with anybody else. And they're probably going to be thinking about some other guy or some other thing or some other woman. It just that's one thing I suppose that we should all look out for in today's world, is that how present is this person? Because if they're not present, we're going to need to let them carry their own burdens. There's another verse in the Bible where Jesus says, I don't remember the actual name of it right now, but the verse goes something along the lines of, "Let the dead bury their dead." Well, that seems kind of brutal, right? That seems kind of brutal. It's like, yeah, leave those mother leave those mother crappers behind. Like, that's kind of what it sounds like. That's kind of what the scripture sounds like. It's very harsh. But what exactly does it mean? Well, it means that you can't save the people that don't even have eyes to hear or eyes to hear, eyes to see, or ears to hear. You can't save those people because they're not present. They're already spiritually dead. They're somewhere else. You can't get to them. And that's going to be a harsh reality that you're going to have to accept with a lot of different kinds of people. And especially if you've had a childhood that has been any kind of tragedy or some kind of trauma, and you're finding yourself repeating certain patterns in life, you really have to take a good hard look at yourself and ask why those patterns are happening still. And something that I'm still working on to this day, and I think I will forever work on, is just making sure that I'm staying completely solid in my own internal energy, and that I'm not letting, whether it's Jezebels or any kinds of stress at work or whatever it is, or business, or however, like finances, I'm not going to let that penetrate my spirit. Because if I'm going to let that penetrate my spirit, then how strong is my will then, really? And that's going to be a question that you have to ask yourself. I hope this message was insightful and informative and useful as well. And peace be with you. Till next time.